All right, Vikings vent line. Happy Sunday. The draft has came and went. The mock draft community is over with. The Vikings grades are coming in from numerous outlets. The Vikings draft is now complete. They've drafted a handful of players, and I'm excited to talk to Vikings fans here in just a little bit. What's up, guys? Executive producer here, Declan Goff, Sands, Mackey, and Judd. Figured I'd open up this forum a little bit for a little Sunday afternoon vent line session here. Obviously, with now the Vikings having completed that draft, I'm curious to hear what so many Vikings fans have to say on this draft. I'm going to have my guys Jay, Evan, and Ben, loyal listeners here of Vikings Vent Line and veterans of Vikings Vent Line, join me here in just a second to talk some draft. I'm going to do this the best I can. Typically, when it's Mackie, Judd, and myself, I'm able to comb through some emails, invite as many Vikings fans as I possibly can. Well, today I am the center, quarterback, coordinator, head coach, quality control coach, anything you want to name. It's going to be coming through me. So I'm going to start with Jay, Evan, and Ben here in just a little bit. But if you'd like to get in on this episode, and you're listening to this live, it's scrolling across the bottom of your screen right now. It's Vikings Vent Line at gmail.com. Shoot me an email and invite. I got some Vikings fans that I have lined up already. But also, if I don't get to you today, please flood that email box. I'll still be doing this show every Sunday during the off season to bring Vikings fans on, and we'll have plenty to talk about for really honestly weeks to come. So if you don't get on this episode, all good. I'll have you lined up for a future one. But if you'd like to voice some thoughts on the Vikings and their draft class, shoot me an email, VikingsVentLine at gmail.com. Of course, Purple Daily and Ventline is sponsored by our friends at Surly Brewing Company. If you're able to make it out to the Surly Beer Hall on Thursday for our draft party, thank you so much for everyone that turned out for that. It was seriously, we're not exaggerating when we say one of the coolest moments here at Score North in our history, and we loved meeting so many Vikings fans. I'm curious in what we do in future events. We're obviously hopefully going to make that a yearly thing at Surly. So thank you to Surly Brewing. Try the Furious, try the Drips and Drops, try the Supreme, the Surly Hell. So many different options at Surly Brewing. And of course, TCL. Enjoy more of what you love with TCL. We were watching those draft recaps on our TCL television. So thank you to TCL and Surly Brewing for sponsoring Vikings Vent Line. All right, so Mackie and Judd and myself kind of gave our initial thoughts yesterday on Purple Daily, right here on this YouTube channel and on Apple, Spotify, and the Score North app of what we kind of thought just initially, our gut reaction of the Vikings draft class. And we'll honestly have more for you in the coming days here once we're back at full strength. But I figured I'd love to turn it over to you guys, the Vikings fans, to give me your thoughts on this Vikings draft class. So let's turn it over to the fans. Let's get our guy Ben. Let's get our guy Evan. My dude Jay also in the house here. Evan back at home in Georgia, Ben down in Florida, my guy Jay locally here in Eden Prairie with me here in Minnesota as well. So, boys, I figured I'd start with you three. You guys are loyal listeners of Purple Daily. You've been on Vent Line and write that down before. I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts on this draft class were. Ben, I'll start with you. What are your initial thoughts here on this Vikings draft class now that it's over and done with?
I've been kind of combing through a lot of Twitter stuff. People giving the Vikings like a D or an F or something. I would give it a good solid B. I think they are not, I don't think the team is in a position where one player in the draft suddenly changes the outlook of the season. And I really like Kwesi's approach of let's get like maybe 3 to 4 players or 5 players that can be really good. Maybe not great, not all time great, but just really good, solid players. I don't mind them picking a safety at the end of the first round. I love the stocking up on the corners, edge rushers, because I think we can all agree that the biggest problem with this team last year was the defense. And I thought they did a good job of picking up players that can be good contributors this year, possibly good players next year. So overall, I like the draft. But again, we can't be really grading drafts until we see guys out there playing football this season. So I'd give it a good solid B.
Yeah, right. It's really easy to give a quick overreaction or a quick letter grade, and that's what we're kind of doing here right now on Vent Line. But at the same time, we really won't know what it's like until about 2 or 3 years down the road, and we're really able to evaluate that class. But in general, I think, Ben, your initial point of they clearly went defense heavy. This defense has holes. It's finished in near the bottom of the NFL the last 2 seasons, and they've obviously prioritized that. And hopefully, as they build that up and as seasons pass, that those players can be contributing players on that Vikings defense. Jay, what about you, man? How do you feel about this Vikings draft class?
It's kind of weird because I think they went into this class with the philosophy of the team is by and large ready to win a lot of games right now. So we just need like a couple extra players to push us over the edge, which I disagree with. I think that they should have blown everything up this offseason, but they very clearly didn't. So in the context of what they're trying to accomplish, which is just to get a few nice players that can sort of push them over the edge on defense, I give the draft like an 8.5 out of 10. I actually really liked it when Rick traded back. I think it's smart, you know. I think especially from an economic standpoint, from like an analytical standpoint, which is what Kwesi like has a background in. Like all of those guys who sort of like study analytics, study economics, and like also study football, like I think they all have a consensus that by and large trading back is the smart thing to do because like every first round pick carries a certain amount of risk. And so I think that the more you trade back, the more you sort of trust your own instincts on your ability to find players in the second round, in the late first round that can still start and be stars on your defense or offense. I think that the ability to trade back and the ability to trust yourself to find players in that sort of area in the late first, second round that can start. I think that's perfectly fine. And so, I thought the trading back was fine. I thought the players they drafted were fine. I really don't have a problem with this.
Jay, to your point about analytics, and look, analytics is just exploding in all of sports right now. This is not just a football thing. It's happened in baseball for a long time now. But, in hockey it's happening more, and basketball is happening more. And look, we can have a little bit of questions about what's Kwesi's plan of trading back. Why are you always trading back? Why don't you just take the BPA? Why don't you just get the player that's best available in the original slot? But there clearly is a method to their madness. They're smarter people than all us four. At least they have the qualifications to be. So I'm curious how it all plays out, and there's clearly a method to their madness. To me, I think the only thing that kind of stands out is it just seems like the collaboration effect, which at first thought, oh, this is great, right? This isn't going to be a stranglehold that Zimmer kind of had where, hey, I'm an old crusty football coach and I want to have things my way, and Kwesi wants to collaborate. Well, sometimes when it comes to decision making, like you got to have the guy to make the decisions, right? Like it's great to have cooks in the kitchen, but at the end of the day, who's the head chef and who's the one who's going to make the call on that? And I think that's where I was a little confused and have some trepidation, I guess, as I watched that draft play out. Of course, we could all eat crow if this Vikings team gets off to a hot start in 2022 or in years to come is perennially competing for Super Bowl championships. Evan, what about you, man? You were here at Surly on Thursday. What do you think about the Vikings draft class so far?
Initially after round one and then a little bit after day two, I was down on the draft. I was thinking C at best. But once after I did a little bit more research, got to know a little bit more about Lewis Seen and definitely about Ed Ingram. I came to the consensus that it's more of a B minus. I think they got a day one starter at left guard, which is valuable. I think they got a starting corner in Andrew Booth. I think that's quality. And then they got Lewis Seen, who I think can not only start right away but can be an heir apparent to Harrison Smith. So it was a nice mix of what they're trying to do overall, which is a competitive rebuild. And they're just, not only trying to add talent that can, start now, but, add their collection of players for their next regime. So I think it was a pretty solid draft.
Yeah, and look, I think Seeing too is obviously most likely going to be a day one starter alongside Harrison Smith. I know Andrew Bynum played pretty well. Andrew Bynum. Oh my, did I say Andrew Bynum, the basketball player right now? Oh my gosh, Cameron Bynum. Played pretty well, obviously, when he got a spot. But Sean and Andrew Booth are probably the two players that are going to be guys that can step in right away and be day one contributors. After that, is it depth? How well do they perform in training camp? Curious on that, how that goes. Ben, back to you really quick. Outside of Sean, is there a player that stood out to you that they selected, or maybe a player that also they missed out on? What was kind of your takeaway from that?
I'm a little surprised that they passed on Malik Willis several times. I'm a little surprised that they didn't take a flyer on Sam Howell. But also, I'm also surprised that they didn't draft a center. Now, apparently Ingram, I think, can play center, apparently. But I'm a little surprised that they never went the center route. Maybe they're still going to sign J.C. Tretter. He's still out there. So that's always a possibility. But I think Ingram can be I think Ingram's probably your starting right guard. But I am a little surprised that they didn't do anything to really address the center position, because I know Kevin says that there's things that we can do for Brad. I know Kevin thinks he believes in Bradbury, but a lot of the tape that I've seen over the last 3 years, I don't know what coaching is going to do to stop him from getting just body slammed by Akeem Hicks and bigger defensive tackles every single game. Like, I don't see that. So maybe Ingram's going to be the future center. Maybe they're going to sign J.C. Tretter, but I'm a little surprised that they didn't do something to address center, because that was just as much of a problem as the right guard was.
Yeah, they're clearly trusting. I made this point yesterday with Mackie and Judd that because they didn't really draft any outside of Ingram in as a guard in the third round, they didn't really make a play to make this offense better. Like, they basically have said, hey, the offense is what it is. It's been good, but it still hasn't cracked that top 10, top 5 offense that it should be. And we just need minor tweaks and different play calling and a different culture, and it will be. Now, to a degree, I agree with that, right? Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook. I know Adam Thielen's up there in age. You get Irv Smith back and plug and playing. KJ Osborne took a step forward. Like, there's definitely a good amount of players in that offense that you should say that, yes, this will be a better offense, just with better play calling and leadership. But I think not adding just some type of ingredient or some type of flavor to that offense was a little surprising. Yeah. To your point about the line too, like, I'm shocked they didn't take a center. I thought they would take a center somewhere between rounds 2 and 5, and they just did not want to do that.
I think what they're doing is I think the best is pretty clear. They really think Mike Zimmer and Clint Kubiak were clueless on how to run an offense.
Yeah,
they took 2 offensive players out of that draft. They said, no, the offense is fine on personnel. We just need better coaching there, which is, they could be right, but that's also a very dangerous thing to assume.
Mm-hmm. Right. Jay, what about you, man? Is there a player that stood out to you, or even a player like Malik Willis who was taken by Tennessee that maybe you'd like to see the Vikings have taken a chance on? What do you think?
I was really surprised when they passed on to Kobe Dean. In general, I was surprised when the whole league passed on him. He was projected first rounder. I think the Vikings might even been mocked to get him at like 12, like back a month ago or something like that. And so, they had an opportunity to take him in the first. They passed on them, which made sense. They had opportunity to take him the second. They didn't do it again, which I thought was really shocking, because I still think they need a linebacker. They got Hicks, they got Kendricks, and I guess they could line up Smith at linebacker if they really wanted to. And then you still need one. And so I thought that Dean makes sense. He played alongside Lewis Seen, so you could just put him on that defense, giving those two some chemistry. And so passing on him was really surprising. And so I wonder if there's something wrong with him. Like, there's some information that teams have on Dean that let him fall this far, but I don't know.
Yeah, Nakobe Dean, like you said, man, he was being mocked to the Vikings at 12 by some mockers just like a few weeks ago. And I think health was potentially an issue there with him. But yeah, I was shocked on how far he fell. To the point of Malik Willis, I mean, man, I think that's the best situation he could have walked himself into, right? Like, Tennessee's with Tannehill, they're contractually obligated to play him still. They're not going to be getting out that contract anytime soon. It allows Malik Willis to sit a little bit, and then the Titans can potentially plug and play him. And yeah, I mean, the Vikings didn't take a quarterback. They didn't take any chance on a quarterback, and that kind of tells me, before I get to Evan here, that either number one, that they don't want to upset Kirk, or two, that actually there is something with Kellen Mond, right? Because if Kellen Mond hasn't, there's something at play there that he can actually be a backup and maybe potentially a viable quarterback down the line. Because if they would have taken a quarterback, I think early in the first few rounds, that would have solidified that, yeah, we do not believe in Kellen Mond. And I think Kevin O'Connell and their entire coaching staff, Kwesi and everyone, has probably been studying a lot of film trying to figure out, like, is this dude able to play? Was Mike Zimmer right? Was it a reach by Spielman? The whole thing was very interesting that they didn't want to do that. Evan, what about you, man? Was there any player that really stood out to you, or a player that they missed out on in this draft?
Yeah, it was around the pick where we took a Caleb Evans, I think around 118. We were at 122, and then we traded back to 126 and then up to 118. And I thought we were either going to get Calvin Austin or Khalil Shakur, and they went to the Steelers and the Bills respectively. I really thought we were going to add a receiver earlier than we did. These are guys that were both burners and, showed, great route running. And I was really surprised that we didn't, pick one of those positions earlier. But, to your point about the quarterback situation, I wasn't surprised they didn't pick a quarterback. I did not expect them to pick one, especially with this draft class. I mean, a lot of guys that we were kind of high on, obviously the league didn't feel the same way. Some people thought Carson Strong was going to be a third, fourth round pick. I think he went undrafted. So it was just goes to show the quality of this draft. The one thing about the draft that I was surprised is that the amount of trade backs we did do, we never, accumulated any draft capital for next year. We actually gave up a fourth from next year. So I'm kind of surprised about that. I thought we would have tried to position ourselves with more capital for next year, try to move up to get a quarterback and an heir apparent for Kirk. But I guess probably around midseason we'll see how things are going with Cousins, and then they'll probably start making moves from them about where they want to position for their quarterback for the future.
Right here on our YouTube page, Cheese on Top 17 comments, why trade with Green Bay? Obviously, the Vikings made a trade with the Packers on day 2. They made, obviously, the trade with the Lions on day 1. Do you guys have a little bit, and I have trepidations on that? Mostly because, obviously, both those teams took wide receivers. Like, they took skill position players that could potentially burn you.
I think...
Ben, what do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
I think... So Green Bay, and somebody made a comparison, and I think it could be accurate. They say Green Bay took a FCS version of Marquez Valdes-Scantling,
okay,
which not really that much of a game changer. So, maybe he ends up working out. I heard he had a big issue with drops. That is definitely something to look at going forward. We could regret passing on Jameson Williams from Alabama again, but his injury is probably leading for trepidation, and it's the Lions. So I'm not holding out my breath that it's actually going to work out there. But I don't know. It's tough to evaluate anybody until they're actually out there on the field playing. So would I trade with division rivals? Probably not. That is a rarity. But I also, with Kwesi doing that, it signals that, oh yeah, this is definitely a lot different. Like, he's definitely going at it a different way than what a normal GM will do. And time will tell if that was the right decision.
Here's what I do respect about it is, because this happens in baseball a lot too, where trade deadline heats up and I can't trade the Twins, right? Like you can't make a trade in your own division. You're going to see that guy 18 times a year. If you can get the best package available, why are you just automatically saying no to 4 of those teams or 3 of those teams in the division? So I do respect him to there. The thing that just scares me a little bit, and I get, yes, the Lions aren't in a great spot, haven't historically ever been in a good spot. Jared Goff is kind of a bum, but I just think taking wide receivers there, especially against a defense that is clearly going to still be a work in progress, I mean, that could burn you. And Vikings fans, and it's an overreaction league and an overreaction sport, I could see that potentially going the wrong way. But I do respect Kwesi for at least, hey, listen to the best offer, and he pulled the trigger on one. Jay, what do you think, man? How do you think about those trades in the division?
I really don't care. I mean, if you think and you've made the analysis that by moving back 20 spots, you can still get your guy, you're going to get more capital, and you think that you're still going to be able to have success with the players and everything that you can accumulate from that trade, I don't care. Trade with whoever. I think that to be concerned with who you're trading with and sort of have the mentality of, well, we can't associate with any of our division rivals, like we're going to do what we feel is worse for us just for the sake of not benefiting one of our other teams in the division. I think that's a losing mentality. I think that you have to focus on benefiting your own team. If Jameson Williams or Christian Watson is a star, then I don't care. I mean, to be honest, then just figure out a way to stop him. You draft Andrew Booth, you have to Lewis sign. Your secondary should be ready to stop him. But I mean, overall, just in general, I don't care about trading in divisions. Just do whatever is best for your team, and then that should work out. Just sort of account for whatever benefit that the Lions or the Packers are getting.
Hey, man, dude, I completely agree. Evan, what about you, man? What do you feel about them trades in the division with Detroit and Green Bay?
They don't bother me one bit. I mean, I wasn't high on Jameson Williams or the guy that Green Bay got, but even if Jameson Williams turns into Megatron, Detroit has had Megatron.
That's right.
So, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think it just goes to show how confident Kwesi and KOC are in their own abilities, which will play out whether it's going to be good or bad, but they're extremely confident in what they can do. And, he made that point to say multiple times, they have to play us. We're not really concerned about, the teams that they're building on. So, yeah, it doesn't bother me one bit that they're trading within the division.
What do you guys think about them obviously going defense super heavy here on days 1 and 2? Obviously, the Vikings defense is going to be a work in progress, and yeah, they might have two day 1 starters potentially with their first 2 picks. Do you guys feel like they've done enough to make that defense better, at least on paper? I know, again, time tells in the season and how it goes in training camp. Ben, what do you think? Do you think that defense is trending to being back at least on the uptick? What do you think?
Um, I don't think so. I think it's still probably going to be an average to below average unit. I am also a little shocked that they didn't do much to address the defensive tackle position because that's another area where they weren't really all that strong in. But I think this is also putting a lot of pressure on the offense. The offense is going to have to score 30, 35 points a game to win. I don't think the defense is going to be, I don't think defense is going to be terrible like last year, but they're not going to be great. So that's just, I think they are probably an average to below average unit that might have a game or two there where they're probably good. But that's just me. I do like that they attack the corner position really strong in the free agency and the draft because cornerback play was terrible for them. Out of all the positions on defense, cornerback play was probably the worst. And I really like that they really attacked that position in free agency and the draft as well.
Yeah, if you can't stop the pass in the NFL, which by the way, it's almost impossible now in today's NFL to like be elite, shut down the pass like that. The Legion of Boom defense in Seattle. Obviously, the Vikings had the number one defense in 2017, but clearly got exposed when it came playoff time. It's hard to shut down the pass, but to Ben, to your point, dude, I mean the cornerbacks having guys like Troy Dye out there and just having just absolute bums that probably should not be out there, not a great spot to be. And look, Cam Dantzler, who I think had more off the field character problems where he was inactive for a few games after a really promising rookie season, I think probably steps back in and has a little bit more awareness and should be better there. Patrick Peterson is at least just an average cornerback at best, and that's still fine. So I think in general they've done enough, to fix that pass defense and hopefully just be competent again. What is so curious to me is to the point of this offense has to score 30 to 40 points, right? Like even if the defense makes minimal improvements, they go from, let's call it 30th in points to 20th in points, which is still a below average defense. That means the Vikings offense legitimately has to be a top 5 offense. Like they have to take that next step because the defense probably overnight is not just going to return to being a top 10 defense, but they're banking on the fact with coaching and different personnel that this offense can break that glass ceiling. So it is kind of an interesting concept on their side. Jay, what do you think, man? Do you think they made the right decisions, obviously going with the defense heavy? Do you feel like this defense is potentially on track to be back to where it was?
Yeah, I really hope it is. I mean, they put so many resources in that defense. If the defense is not back to an above average unit, something has gone horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. Because with all the money you put in, there's been Harrison Phillips, Jordan Hicks, all the draft capitals, Darius Smith, you're getting Daniel Hunter back. If this unit is not back to like top 15, then something has gone horribly, horribly wrong, whether it be, more catastrophic injuries or like none of your draft picks work out. This should be a unit that is ready to roll again. I mean, but in terms of like the actual philosophy of it, like going heavy on the defense, I don't agree with that at all. I think that like straight from the beginning, they should have blown this whole team up. I think they should have gotten a new core. I think they should have gotten a new quarterback. But I mean, since they decided not to do that, I think going defense was probably the best decision in the context of what they're trying to do. And so I fully expect this unit to be top 15. I expect Lewis Cine to be a rotational player that makes plays. I expect this defensive line to be one of the best in the NFL, given the players that you've added to it. And I expect the secondary to be vastly improved. And if it's not, then something's gone horribly wrong.
Evan, what do you think, man? Do you think the defense has made strides, like Jay is saying here, to potentially be a top 15 defense again?
We'll see. A lot. If Zadarius Smith and Daniel Hunter are healthy, absolutely. Because that's a pretty impressive pass rush duo. So if they rush the passer and the cornerback play improves a little bit, I can see them being top 15. But that's probably their ceiling.
Yeah. Evan, what about you, man? Do you think the defense has made strides here?
I do. I think it's more attributed to the scheme change than actual personnel added. Last couple of years we've had these personnel, but we just haven't been fortunate enough to stay healthy. And if we're fortunate enough to stay healthy this year, along with the scheme change, I think we'll be a good bend don't break defense. I think we're going to try to be more of a situational defense, but the one thing I am concerned about is our run defense. Because in order for us to, be able to attack the passer and, affect the pass game, we're going to have to be able to stop the run. And if they're able to, get 3-4 yards a clip, then, it's going to be hard to try to make them one-dimensional and, meet at the quarterback as Zadarius and Daniil want to do.
I think the defense is going to be a more creative scheme defense because it looked really stale the last 2 years. Like it felt like they were running the same defensive plays almost every single time. I think we'll see a lot more creativity in the defensive scheme, which is good.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think getting. No, sorry. I was going to say I think getting seen will allow Harrison Smith to roam a little more, help out in the run defense, and I think having the two of them, I don't think Seen is as good as Hamilton, but I think he has some of the same skill sets to where he could, hover around down the box and he can, get back because I think he ran a 4.37. So, he has the athletic ability to do a lot of the things Harrison Smith does do, and he's a film junkie. So I think, getting another.
Might have lost Evan there for a little bit. Andy and Devarius, who I see hanging out in the green room here, I'm about to pop them on the screen here just a bit as well. But before I do that, I'd love to get your guys' just kind of last thoughts on the draft. Ben, I'll start with you. Just kind of last overall thoughts here on this draft. Do you think the Vikings are going to have a good one here? And what do you think of the next kind of moves the Vikings are going to potentially make even before training camp and OTAs start?
So the only one that I think they could do is sign J.C. Treader. I think a lot of fans will be excited about that because that's a center who can play. Far as my overall final thoughts on the draft, I really feel like this is a team kind of in a transition phase. I think this draft is more – they're going to look for this draft to contribute more to 2023 when I think they could be looking for their new quarterback. So
right.
I think that this is a draft we're going to get a bunch of good players, not great players. We're going to get a bunch of good players, and we're going to really stack this roster, do the draft, and then we're going to move the quarterback in 2023 and draft his replacement. And then from 2023 on, we're going to mash the gas. So that's what I think this draft is more about. That's why, that's why I understand not drafting a Kyle Hamilton or not drafting a player who could be great when you can get 3 to 4 players that could be really good for the next year.
Totally. Jay, what do you think, man? What's kind of your last thought on this draft, and what are the next things for the Vikings to do?
I think this draft is setting up for a really huge offensive draft next year. I think that they're going to take quarterback next year. I think they're going to take a new wide receiver. I think they're going to go hard on skill positions next year. I think that for first draft, I thought this was solid. I think that all these players have potential to be starters, especially the first 3 they took. But, I mean, I think that overall they're probably done this offseason. I think they've gotten all their players. If they were to add anyone, I could see them adding Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr., or Jarvis Landry.
I like it.
Because they might need their wide receiver. But by and large, I think they're probably done. And in terms of the players they add this offseason, I think that time will tell, to be honest. If this defense is improved, it worked. If defense is barely improved or it's not improved at all, then this offseason was a failure. So time will tell.
Yeah, I think they'll probably still add at least one more wideout. Like they've done that in the last few years with D.D. Westbrook. Aldrick Robinson was brought in last second. I know Kendall Wright didn't make the team, but they've always kind of still brought in at least some type of veteran wide receiver on either the eve of training camp to just either compete for a spot or push another dude. So I think they're mostly done, making moves. I mean, the J.C. Treader thing I think kind of changes the entire dynamic. Like if they sign him, like honestly, it kind of changes how we view that offensive line. But I don't know if they'll have the cap space or really if he and also J.C. Treader himself obviously wants to come here either, and that's going to be an interesting spot. Evan, if you are still there, man, what is your kind of last thought on this draft? Lost Evan for a little bit. That's all good. Ben and Jay, thank you, dudes, for coming on Vikings Vent Line for me here and voicing your thoughts. Love to get you guys on a future show. Thank you so much for making some time, and Skol Vikes.
Thanks, Dex. Take care.
Thank you, Dex.
Yep. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Ben. Let's keep it rolling here. Let's get my guy Andy on. Andy, what's up, dude? How are you?
How you doing, Declan?
Good, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah. It was kind of a surprise. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my afternoon, and there you go. Like, perfect. Absolutely.
Hell yeah, man. What do you think of the draft?
I think a a lot of the experts or people getting hung up on where the board was in their mind before the draft, right? Every year, nobody really knows what they're talking about, but especially this year, that was exposed, right? Everybody clamoring for Malik Willis at the end of the first round or at the beginning of the second round. All of the discrepancies and grading at this point is all based on the pre-draft stuff, which this draft class was affected the most by COVID. Yep. No, everybody else had a little tape before. They're either the next class is going to have the tape after, but this is the one that got hit the hardest. So I think there's a lot more inertia between the top picks and where things were going. That's why getting more picks and getting depth out of Detroit and Green Bay. If they're going to, Quezzy said this last night, if they're going to get those two wide receivers anyway, whether they trade with you or they trade with the person behind you, at least this way you're getting things off of them. And to extrapolate that a little bit further, they also pulled depth out of Green Bay and Detroit. We took guys who had the ability to move picks around that they were willing to give up, even though we didn't get anything for next year. Who cares? The way he moved around was way different than what Spielman would have done. You saw like the Tennessee trade, right? The AJ Brown trade. That seemed more like a Spielman type trade than any of the ones that Quezzy made. He moved back, he'd get capital, he see somebody that he wanted, he'd go up and get him, right? Yeah, he skipped out on Kyler Gordon. He skipped out on the McCreary kid from Auburn. Time will tell on that, right? Booth might be the best one out of all of them. I guess we'll find out. But he has his finger on the pulse a lot more, and he's not afraid to go get the guys that he wants, right? He's very honest in that. We kind of knew before the draft that he wasn't going to take a wide receiver because of the thing he said about Keenan McCardell. They like their wide receiver room. They think they can add depth in other places. You were talking before about guys they could add. I still think Akeem Hicks is the guy that they ultimately add before training camp. Mm-hmm. He fits super well in the Fangio Donatel defense. He's familiar with it. I think they're just probably waiting to see how much money they can give him, right? Because it's strange that there hasn't been any talk about him or Barr or Kyle Fuller. And I think all three of those guys could be an option. I know Purple Daily is in love with J.C. Treader. It's mentioned every single time. But those three defenders are familiar, with the system or with the facility and could come in and make a difference right away.
Totally, dude. Yeah, Akeem Hicks would be great. He terrorized Kirk Cousins for the last few years, and obviously just more people on that defensive line are great. They brought in Sheldon Richardson last minute last year. Everson Griffin signed in the middle of training camp. So, that's definitely not off the table. You're right, though. Guys like Barr and Fuller are still out there, which is honestly kind of confusing. However Vikings fans feel about Anthony Barr, he is a quality football player. Right. It is kind of surprising, him and Fuller and guys are still out there in the free agent market.
I call guys like Anthony Barr a Sunday Night Football guy because, when guys like Chris Collinsworth make broad statements about the Vikings defense, he always mention Anthony Barr. Probably because he's senile and that's the one guy he can remember because he's been there forever. But it's not nothing, right? Even though they're changing defensive schemes, it might even be a better fit for Barr than what the previous one playing that weak side. And it's weird that there's nobody's been talking about it, right? What rumors have you seen about him? Even with Gilmore and some of those other guys, with Honey Badger, you're seeing that stuff all the time. These are quality Pro Bowl players, and nobody's saying anything about them. There's got to be a reason for that.
Totally. Andy, what else, man? Do you still feel like the Vikings have come out on this draft with a better defense? Do you feel like this offense, even though they haven't didn't take really necessarily skill positions early in the first days of the draft, do you think that this defense is trending in the right direction and that the offense is also going to be able to just have a different scheme fit and be able to cook and be a top 5 offense?
Declan, have you ever been super poor for a long period of time?
Yes, I've been laid off before. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I don't mean to hit any buttons, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
So if you think about your own literal food cupboard, right? Mm-hmm. You get to a point where you eat all your COVID rations, you're almost out of everything, right? Yep. And you have to just go get a baseline. And then when you get a little bit more money and a little bit more flexibility, you go get the stuff that you actually want, right? Yeah. But there's that base layer. And I think these guys came in with a decent base layer, but they needed to add warm bodies with some potential in places, and they absolutely did that. You look at the cap number for Harrison Smith next year. Cam Bynum look good. You add him with Lewis Cine. There you have a guy that knows the system, learned from the guy that left, and may be a little bit have a different skill set than Harrison Smith did.
Mm-hmm.
The corners, who knows, right? They're big bodies. It seemed like this year the little guys seem to get a lot of the love, especially the kid from Missouri is a big kid. You add that with Dantzler, with still who knows, and they're all learning from Pat Pete. They're just building to that point where you can have people over for supper, right? They're getting to that point, but it took a trip to the grocery store first before they could.
I love the analogy, dude. That's perfect. No, I completely hear what you're saying there. Last kind of thing for you, Andy. Do you think that this Vikings team has done enough with now the draft is over, the first real significant wave of free agents have been added? Do you think this team has done enough to be a playoff team in 2022?
I think there's more than ever in probably the last 15 years, there are big question marks across the NFC. There's, Seattle, who had been a mainstay for a long time. Who knows what the hell's happening in Arizona? The Rams seem to be running it back, but the Packers are in a different place. I think the Bears are going to be awful, and Detroit's on the upswing. So there could be a lot of weird things that happen this year that you don't quite know which way it's going to go. But yes, ultimately I do. I don't think the Packers are going to be able to maintain what they've been doing. They're going to take a step backwards. And even if it's, a 10 or 11 win team that wins the division, I think they find their way in there.
Nice, dude. Yeah, I think so too. I think that they should potentially still be a wild card team. If they stay healthy, they could obviously still surpass the Packers. I'm curious on how all that plays out. Andy, thanks for coming on, dude.
Hey, man,
thanks
for having me. My friend Rami used to work with you guys, and
hell yeah.
He kind of turned me on to this, and I've been watching for the last little while, so it's cool to interact. I wish if you could pass a message along to Judd. He might have an alcohol problem. Like he talks about Surly in a way that, like, I hope he talks about his wife in the same capacity, because it's becoming a little obsessive.
He definitely drinks responsibly, as they like to say. He drinks responsibly. He loves his beers, but he drinks responsibly. I can't vouch for him there. Andy, appreciate you, man. Say hi to my guy Rami too if you see him. And you soon, okay?
Absolutely appreciate it, Declan. Have a good night.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate you, dude. Let me get my guy Evan back on. You had some connection problems there at the end.
Yeah,
Evan,
dude, my Wi-Fi spazzed out. I'm sorry.
All good, dude. Your kind of last Vikings take. Trey, I see you hanging out in the green room too. I'll pop you on here right after Evan. You're just kind of your last Vikings take. Evan, what do you think, man?
I'm thinking this season is going about 10, 11 wins with one playoff victory, and probably be it after that. I think I'm kind of disappointed Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi has looked at Kirk and, seen the potential to actually win big games just because I just don't see it. And I'll lead Crow if I'm wrong, but I guess just big picture overall, I don't think he's the guy to lead this roster, because this roster, I don't think has enough around him to, get the things done that he needs to. So I think that's just my big picture takeaway.
Awesome. Evan, thank you, man. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you making the trek up here, dealing with this internet issues too. Thank you, man. We'll get you on another episode, okay?
For sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan. All right, let's get one last guy in here before we wrap. Trey, what's good, dude?
What's going on, Dex? Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. What did you think of the Vikings draft?
I really disliked it at first. I not disliked it, that's the wrong word. I disliked the trade that we made. It was I didn't love the Lions trade. I also didn't love the that we gave up 46. But after having the time to sleep on it and kind of thinking about everything, I really love the players that we got when we got them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seemed like, even though they traded back and it was a little bit of annoying at first, right? Like, we didn't want to see that as Vikings fans. I don't think wanted to see that, dealing with Trader Rick, who loved to do that, right?
Rick for so long.
But I think also, and look, I was honestly frustrated as anyone else watching Day 2 play out live on this YouTube channel, but then they trade up for Andrew Booth, and it was like, oh, okay, all right, they're actually going to use some of that capital to move up to get a player that was maybe falling on their board, but they know that they want him now, and I think that says a lot too, dude. So I really thought it was a good draft. Do you think that they've done enough to kind of improve this defense, even if it's in the long haul? Do you think this defense trends towards being a better defense than it has been over the last 2 seasons?
Yeah, I think most of that will come from less of the personnel because I think we have the personnel to be really good. Like Zadarius and Daniil, if they stay healthy, they'll be arguably a top 5 pass rushing unit. Harrison Phillips is a good run stuffer. Dalvin Tomlinson gets overlooked a lot, but he was like amazing last year. I really love Scene. I really love Booth. And I think an underrated pick that a lot of people were actually really mad at, but I really loved was the Brian Asamoah pick.
Yeah.
He was all the good parts of Nakobe Dean, not quite as good at pass rushing without the injury problems. So I might get dragged in the comments for saying that, but Brian Asamoah, I liked him more than Chanel. I didn't like him as much as Nakobe Dean, but he flies around the field. He's a big hitter. I really like the Ed Ingram pick. The Pro Football Focus's best pass blocking guard in the draft. I know he has his off-field issues that can't be ignored, but I like that pick as far as like who he is as a player on the field. And as far as the defense goes, I think the switch to 3-4 will really allow some of these players to shine because that's where DJ Wanham shined when he was in college. That's where Janarius Robinson shined when he was in college. So I think as long as we can get the defense, like Jay was saying, even in like the top 18, I believe enough in Kevin O'Connell, who actually likes Kirk versus Zimmer, to be able to get enough from the offense that if our defense doesn't allow a historic number of points in the last 2 minutes of the game, that we'll be able to hold on to leads.
Yeah, I think that they've clearly, especially with this draft, is that they basically are banking on the fact that this offense just needs different coaching and different personnel, or a different scheme, and the personnel that's in place is going to be able to be a top 5 unit. Now, it's a little bit of a gamble on their part. I mean, I'm a little surprised that it adds some type of skill position guy in day 1 or 2 of the draft.
Same.
But look, it hasn't reached its full potential, and that's probably because it was held back by Mike Zimmer, who wanted to just run the football and keep things very vanilla and same, right? So,
I really love the Naylor pick in round 6. Like, I really enjoyed
Jalen Naylor
that pick. Yep.
Okay.
I thought I liked him in the process. Good route runner, was dealing with some injuries, so his speed was really cut down by like in his 40 time and all that, but he's a lot faster on film than his 40 time. Also, going back to the Lions trade, I might get dragged for this. Jamison Williams by my chart was like my receiver 5.
Okay.
So I liked him. He has game breaking speed, but when you watch him, he's not great in the press and he's not great against like just straight man coverage. He's a very good zone breaker, like very good at finding the zones, catching the ball and taking off on people because he's so fast.
Yeah.
But I didn't think he was like as dynamic as people were making him seem. So,
Sure.
I wasn't super high on him. I'm actually more worried about the Packers getting Romeo Doubs than Christian Watson.
Yeah.
Hot take, but it just kind of like those 2 trades. I didn't think were as bad as people made it seem based on the players they got. Williams again was not super high for me. Watson was not super high for me. So we'll see if they turn into stars. I mean, Aaron Rodgers can turn anybody into a star.
Okay.
So we'll see how that makes Watson look. But as far as like who they got, I wasn't super upset with the trade as based on like the players they got.
Trey, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your opinions here. We'll get you on a future episode of Ventline.
Yeah, and I think I got you on Wednesday for write that down.
Oh, hell yeah. Sweet,
yep.
dude. I'll see you on Wednesday then.
Yep.
Love
see
that.
you guys then.
Thank you, Trey. Appreciate it, everyone, joining Vikings Ventline here on Purple Daily. A little impromptu episode on a Sunday. If you'd like to get in on a future episode, we'll do these every Sunday right here in this YouTube channel. So shoot me an email. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. I'll gladly put you in queue and get you on a future episode. Mackie, Judd, and myself back at full strength on Monday to break down so much more of the draft. We're excited to do so. hit the subscribe button right here on Purple Daily. Daily Vikings Entertainment. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.